Hi, Hayden here, and in this video I'm going to be changing out this device right here, which is the filler valve for the toilet. Now we already went to the store and picked up a universal kit. This is actually looks like the exact same. It's the exact same thing as the one which has gone bad. All right. So, but this is what allows the water to come in to our toilet, and then into the tank. And then it stops off at the water line. We make the adjustments for that. It's universally adjustable to allow the height, so you can get the right height that you want for your toilet to have it to flush properly. Before I begin here, the light's going to be changing in a room because the sun's going in and out of clouds, and I can't use my other lights because there's a fan that's also connected to the light, so it makes an unfortunate amount of noise. So with that, the first thing I'm going to have to do is drain the toilet. But the first thing you have to do is shut the water off, because if you don't shut the water off, it's going to start filling up again. So the first thing we do is shut the water off on the valve below. And again, I mentioned in the thing about the sink faucets, when I changed out my faucets in the kitchen area of the house and the office, that these valves on the toilet and underneath the sink and everything, we're not operating these valves all the time. It's not like we're turning the water on and off. We do that all the time. So the valves kind of tend to get their exercise and stay working. But when we turn these valves off, the ones that are for the toilet and underneath the sinks, these are valves that are usually turned on and left on, and we almost like never turn those off. And I find that those kind of valves will tend to go bad over time for non-use, I guess would be the term. And so anyways, pardon this noise while I flush this toilet here. All right, that looks good. Now here's the thing. In the bottom of the toilet, there is that hole which goes down into the toilet itself, and back in the bottom of the tank. In the bottom of the tank, there's that hole where the water goes in, swirls around, and flushes the toilet. And that's great. It should work like that fine. But the thing is, there's a lip. So it's like that hole is kind of raised up a little bit. So there's a whole bunch of water left in the tank. So we have to get all that water out, because when we remove this, it's at the very bottom of the tank. So water's going to come out onto the floor, or hopefully, if I'm smart enough, I'll put something under there to catch the water that's going to fall down towards the floor. All right, so with that, what I'm going to do here is finish draining this water to make sure it's absolutely bone dry, and then I'll go through the disassembly part of it. So I'll come back after I've started taking these things out. All right, so in order to drain the tank completely, or as completely as can be, I basically use a chamois, but you can use any kind of a microfiber towel or any other towel. What you want is something that's going to hold the water, and then when you're going to transfer the water away from the tank, you don't want it dripping all over the place. So you want something that will hold the water and then yet hold it long enough to where you can get it to where you're going to drop it, rinse out the rag. I typically just lift up the toilet seat and drain it, and then squeeze off the excess water into the toilet bowl itself, which we will be flushing probably a number of times. The other thing is, even though I've drained out most of the water, or almost all the water, there is some water in the system, in this device that's in our tank, that's going to have water in it, and that is going to leak out a little bit anyway. So what I do is I typically stretch the chamois out underneath the, or if you have a little pan that can fit down there. Some of them do. You won't have enough room sometimes, and if you have enough room, that's fine. But if not, a chamois or another towel down there, and a nice absorbent towel will get the job done for you. And I just keep drying that stuff up. Now, underneath there's a kind of a nut that screws on, and there's a washer here. I should probably shut it a little bit closer here. This washer is a nice soft washer that sits inside the hole in your tank. So you put that in your tank. That's inside the water part of your tank with the rest of the device, and that is what's going to squeeze down on, because of this nut. You're going to put the tension on there when you screw it on. Only finger tight. Don't over tighten this thing. It's going to be a nightmare if you ever have to get it off again. And you don't want these little tabs to break here. These little tabs on the side. You don't want these to break off, because that's where your fingers are going. All right. You could put a wrench on this, but really only once. And you don't want to squeeze too tight. You don't want to break any of this stuff. You really need it to be functioning, you know what I'm saying? So with that, once you remove this bolt, but before you do that actually, there is a water, the water return, or I guess the fill line goes in here. It actually connects in here and turns on tight, and that is a piece of device that I don't have to remove from the pipe down below, and it is already in place. So I just reconnect it here. But before I do that, I need to seat this in, and in order to do that, I simply remove the old one, which is still dripping a little bit of water. And as you can see, they're almost identical. There's a slight difference. This tube this one here on the new one feels slightly thinner than this one. I don't know why. That's weird. So anyways, other than that, everything connects up the same way. This is the little tube that goes over to the fill, to the water. This center tube here drops water into the toilet as well. It's also the overflow. If you go past the water line, it's going to flow back into the tub. So these other devices I don't even need because they're already in place here from the other unit. Now the first thing I'm going to do before, or I guess the last thing I do before I actually install it, is I want to take my chamois and I just want to clean up around that hole down there. There's actually, there's the hole at the lowest part of the tank. And you just want to make sure that area is all dried up and there's nothing in there that's going to prevent this thing from getting a good seal on the bottom of it. And I wipe the bottom of the tank as well. And with that, we're ready to install this. Now, this is adjustable in size. You can turn it and then you can raise it and lower it. And what this does is this is what actually makes it universal. And you don't need that big bobby ball floating around, the floating ball in there anymore, because this actually determines how high the water will go before it shuts off. All right. So with that, let's go ahead. I'm basically just going to drop this in. It just sits nice and neat in that hole. And you turn this thing back and forth to make sure that it's lined up where you want it to be. And then you make your adjustment for where you want the water height to be. And they have a line. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this on the video. The top of this thing here, that's where you want the water line to be. And inside might be just that. Maybe you can see it right here. There's words. It says water line, and then there's a line all the way around that tube. So you kind of want to match this line up with that line or a little below. It can be slightly above if that's required as well, just as long as you get the right flush pressure out of it. So with that, let me go ahead and install this. I'm going to put that in the hole, put the nut on the bottom, connect the water line, and then adjust the height for where I want it to be in the tank here. So stand by. We'll be right back. Okay, back here, what I've done is I've installed the automatic valve. I have connected all the connections on the bottom, tightened everything up. I've checked it for leaks. I will continue to check for leaks for about a week or two. And then periodically, like every week when I'm in here cleaning the bathroom floor, I will look at, or anytime I'm cleaning the bathroom floor, I always look behind the tub, or behind, I look around the tub and I look in behind or underneath the toilet. I also look underneath my sink to make sure that no leaks have developed that I want to know about as soon as possible rather than later. But with that, this has an additional device on it. There's a little valve that allows me to turn on and off the tank, I guess assisted fill line or whatever. This goes down, this white tube here goes down into the tank and water flushes through the bottom, but when that stops, it also helps to fill the tank back up with water. So the next thing to do, sorry for the noise, maybe I'll tone down the volume here if it gets loud, but to flush, give it a flush test. Okay, it seems to be filling up pretty good. Anyways, this valve right here, I don't know if you can see the water running out this tube, but I can shut that off. You certainly probably heard that. Or I can turn it on. I'm going to leave it on. Now, in the old valve, this tube was about the right length. And maybe I cut this down. I can't remember if I trimmed that down, but I had to trim a piece of the tube off because you don't want the thing sticking up too high. If you have too much of a kink in it, you know, or bending, it will actually stop. So it'll be like pinching off a garden hose, and you don't want that either. So this should stop just right about the top of that water line, and there we have it. So that's a success. The next thing I do is just go ahead and put the lid back on. I will wipe off, there's a little bit of a stain here, so I'll wipe that off before I put the lid back on, and then we'll be cooking with gas. Now, to do this, to actually change this out, I would put this on a level of pretty much a 1. It's an easy replacement to do. If your toilet's running on end, or if it's having a problem shutting off, that was the problem with the old one. It was just like, it wasn't stopping. It would stop. It wouldn't run continuously, but it would have a hard time getting to the stopping point. So we figured it was time to replace that, and it was. And it's great now. It's gonna stop. It's not gonna make any like, it would like stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, and then it would stop, but it would like take a minute or two, and it would squeak when it did that. So I don't know why it was squeaking, but it would do that. And then I just keep checking for leaks. If everything's okay, that's a rock solid, easy to do change. Any homeowner with, you know, I don't think you hardly need any tools. The only tool I did use a channel lock. I got rust on my channel lock. But anyways, I used my channel locks to get the first nut off. It's a plastic nut, so you want to be very, very careful with it. You don't want to put a lot of pressure. You don't want to squeeze too hard because you don't want to break that nut. It's a real pain. You have to replace that whole line. That's the water line going from the wall valve up into the toilet. It has a short line on it, kind of like that long, and it's kind of a tight plastic, so you don't want to break it. You don't want to mess that up because that could be a little bit of a nightmare for you back at the hardware store. So you want to make sure you treat that well because you're going to reuse that nut. That nut is the one that actually goes on the very bottom of this, underneath. This, you know, this other nut, this round nut goes up on top, and this, you know, turns all the way up to the base of the tank, and that pulls this down to make a nice tight watertight seal. But then underneath that, you have to attach the water line to shoot the water up into your tank in the first place. So that is a plastic nut on my particular unit, and you don't want to break that. So you want to treat everything nice and gentle as possible. But other than that, I didn't require any other tools except for a pair of scissors to trim the tube. But other than that, a very easy repair. And until I catch you in the next video, take care and be well.